brought down to earth.
This is KB Antonio Bay.
Fear, so intense, it will stay with you to the grave and beyond.
Where's the fog now?
It should be right outside my door now.
Oh, there's something different about this fog. Dan, stay away from the door! Someone listen to me!
2 murders in a town no bigger than a postage stamp.
And keep a watch out for that fog bank heading in from the east.
Hi, just lie still. I'm gonna give you something. It's gonna make you feel even better.
What's going on in this town?
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Sleazoids, the podcast where we go down the rabbit hole of 20th century genre fare, from the most influential canon classics to the trashiest exploitation films we can get our hands on, and invite you to tag along in helping us create a canon of sleaze. Each week is a double feature grindhouse style where we discuss 2 films loosely related by subject, genre, actor, filmmaker, or franchise. And at the end of each episode, along with our honorary Sleazoids, which you can become by subscribing on Patreon,
Come on.
we decide on all the official ratings and rankings for every film that we cover. Patreon subscribers also get an honor shout out and 2 bonus episodes every single month, which we have been doing for very close to a year. There are 50 plus bonus episodes, so if you haven't made the jump, definitely consider doing that. We've also introduced bonus transmissions, and we've done about 7 or 8 of those now, where we talk about new release movies.
Yeah, I think we did like 4, 5, 6
5 on the last one.
It was
yeah,
pretty
we did
big one.
Color Out of Space, some Uncut Gems. We talked about some good ones, and we got some more coming on the way. We do about 1 a month where we talk some new genre movies.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, we do have a bunch of people who made the jump to Patreon this week, so we're going to thank them here. We have Tony Todd, which I think he's naming himself after the genre movie actor, but maybe that's his real name too. We'll give him we'll give him the benefit of the doubt on that one. Stephanie Monahan. Corey Maureen, Vincent, just Vincent. I'm going to assume that that's Tom Cruise in Collateral. Vincent.
Absolutely.
And then Tony Scott fan 1. He was already in the Discord begging us to do a Tony Scott episode, and I did let him know that we have a Tony Scott double feature coming down the pipeline eventually here. As well as Devin McLaughlin, Nathaniel Fewiger, and I think that's it.
Cool.
All right.
Well, thanks, guys.
Thanks so much
Appreciate
for
you.
signing up over on the Patreon. Hope you guys are enjoying all those bonus episodes, and we appreciate the support. That's the one plug for the week. The second plug, as always, Apple Podcasts. If you guys are listening on Apple Podcasts, make sure to scroll to the very bottom right now as you're listening, right to the bottom. And go down there and give us a good old rating and review. It helps us climb the charts over there and find new listeners, and we appreciate that as well.
Absolutely.
But those are your plugs for the week. Welcome back. I am your host, Josh Lewis, and joining me as always is my co-host,
Jamie Miller. Welcome back, guys.
2 weeks ago, I think, would have been the last time you guys, free listeners, would have heard from us, and we would have had Australian Business Insider. I think he's the editor over there. I almost said writer, but he's a freelance writer over in Australia. James Hennessy on. He's also a short science fiction and horror story writer, and he brought on with him some classic Australian outback road films. Not the one you're thinking. He brought Road Games from 1981 by Richard Franklin, and he also brought Stone from 1974.
And that was good too. I mean, it had its own little low budget charm. I mean, the guy's yelling.
Well, yeah,
Satan,
one is a
Sidecar.
slasher riff on Rear Window, and the other one was a satanic biker hangout film. So if either of those,
you gotta see both of those.
Yeah,
you do.
Jesus.
That
I was sure you were going to say Razorback.
Yeah, no, we did do Razorback though.
Love
we did
Razorback.
Long Weekend and Razorback. One of the first episodes we did on the show, but that was fun too.
Yeah,
we've done quite a lot of Australian genre cinema on here.
Big fan of Australian
and speaking of which,
cinema.
that led us into last week's bonus episode for the Patreon listeners, where we did one I've wanted to hit for a long time. We did obviously the original Mad Max. I can't believe it took us like over 2 years to hit it, but we did Mad Max, and we paired it with one that I watched for the first time a few years ago, and it just destroyed my brain. Death Race 2000.
Oh, man. Loved it.
So
Was
The
introduced
movie's
to that
amazing.
one. So
I was gonna say, if you want to see road massacres, if you want to see
Stallone doing it.
exactly, if you want to see like an exploitation version of Speed Racer or Wacky Races, that's what we talked about on last week's bonus episode alongside George Miller's obviously classic cult exploitation road film Mad Max. So again, patreon.com/Sleazoids podcast if you want to hear that one from last week. But this week, we have a very special guest joining us, someone I've been thinking about trying to get on the show for a while, but he's kind of big in the horror art scene, and I wasn't sure that we could get him. So what I did is I tricked him,
And we hired him.
and we hired him to do our logo
Gave him
art.
some money.
Yeah,
That's how we do.
hired him to do the amazing logo art that he did for the show, which a lot of our fans were completely blown away by when we switched to it. But we have
Yeah, it's
freelance
awesome.
horror artist based out of Toronto, a fellow Canadian here.
Yes.
And that
Yep.
artist is Trevor Henderson. Trevor, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you guys?
Good.
Oh, we're
Thanks
good
for
as
coming
always.
on. And doing
Thank
that
you for
awesome
having me.
logo.
Yeah, no, I'm glad to hear people like it, and that you guys like it, obviously.
Yeah.
Well, we are big fans of Trevor and Trevor's art over here, so I knew that we had to have him on eventually because, when he's not doing art at his house, he is all the time tweeting about all the different horror movies that he's watching. So I knew eventually we had to have him on to bring on a double feature of his own. So Trevor, as it goes, obviously we ask the guest to bring on the double feature with you. So what two films have you brought with you this week, and why do they pair together?
The two films that I brought this week were John Carpenter's The Fog, which is an amazing film that I think kind of gets overlooked a lot in John Carpenter's filmography. It's a really great kind of coastal folk horror ghost story, very classic. And I paired it with probably what I feel is maybe one of the most overlooked horror films of all time, which is Dead and Buried. And the kind of ties that I have connecting the two and why I decided to bring them on as a double feature are small, scenic towns with horrible dark secrets. And I feel like they both kind of border on kind of like a folk horror aesthetic without fully committing to something like Wicker Man. And they both feel like 80s paperback books that came to life, like those really lurid covers that you see in the bookstore. I described it a little earlier as they both feel like Stephen King novels that were never Stephen King novels, sort of.
Yeah.
Yeah,
for
no,
sure.
and the Fog poster especially looks like it could literally just be one of those paperback
Yeah,
covers.
It's funny you say that, actually. I
Oh,
was
for
watching
sure.
these with my brother, and he said that exact same thing. I think
Reminded
it's
him of
probably
Stephen
the
King.
town. Yeah,
The
the Stephen
vibe.
King. He thought that
Small
those
town,
were...
rural America.
Yeah, he thought they were Stephen King stories at first, so yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
interesting.
there you
And
go.
if you ever look at, I don't know if you guys have seen the poster for Dead and Buried, but it's like, it legitimately, you could just take it and slap it on like a shitty dime novel in a drugstore in 1984.
For sure.
It's like this blue, cold face pushed up through like this cracked earth in this painterly style. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's what we're going to be talking about today. That was The Fog, 1980 by John Carpenter, and Dead and Buried, 1981 by a Sleazoid's favorite, Gary Sherman.
Yeah.
We've talked about him
He's incredible.
once doing his Vice Squad movie, and I've wanted to do his Deathline movie for a while too, which is like sort of like a British Hills Have Eyes that takes place on the subway.
Oh, hell yeah.
That movie is amazing. The movie is amazing.
Yeah, that movie is a lot of fun.
Sherman
but-
goes some places, man, I must say.
Yeah. So we are going to jump right into it here, and I think we are going to talk about The Fog.
Do it.
From the creator of Halloween, the ultimate experience in terror and suspense. John Carpenter's The Fog, starring Adrienne Barbeau, Jamie Lee Curtis, John Houseman, Janet Leigh as Kathy Williams, and Hal Holbrook as Father Malone. The Fog. What you can't see won't hurt you. It will kill you. Between midnight and 1, it will find you.
All right, we are talking The Fog, the 1980 American supernatural ghost story horror film directed by John Carpenter, co-written by his... I don't remember if they were still together when they wrote this story or
I
not?
actually read on a review that Deborah did this while he was dating the I can't remember her name right now, the radio girl.
Yeah, Adrian Barbeau.
Right.
Adrian
I heard
Barbeau,
that
yeah.
they were dating at this time, and Deborah still pulled through and killed it, because I mean, this is a
Good
great
job,
film.
Deborah. Well,
so-
because he and Deborah Hill, who was a previous girlfriend of John Carpenter's and obviously a major producer for Carpenter, a major creative collaborator on a lot of his films. She is quite the writer-producer herself, and also gave him a lot of amazing ideas that they ended up using in Halloween.
Oh, yeah.
So they co-wrote this story together. Based on, I think they said it was on a trip to Stonehenge that they took,
Okay.
where they kind of got this weird kind of like coastal creepy vibe while they were there. And also they pulled from an old film called The Trollenberg Terror, which apparently is a British film about some sort of radioactive cloud, and it's that turns into like a science fiction monster, and
Okay.
kind of like
it's giant eyeball monsters in that one.
okay.
Cool.
Well, I got to check that
yeah.
one out. But either way, a combination of those two events led John Carpenter and Deborah Hill to come up with this story, which sort of loosely follows a small California coastal town called Antonio Bay, I believe it's called.
Yeah, you know it. Yeah.
There you go. And which is, I mean, obviously it's a little bit of a reference to Hitchcock's The Birds, which takes place in Bodega Bay. And it follows similarly a sort of like small group of people who are in relation to each other mostly because of this small town. But the film very strategically like kind of like disconnects them all from each other. You have the radio host played by Adrian Barbeau. You have Jamie Lee Curtis playing a hitchhiker passing through the town. You have Jamie Lee Curtis's mom, Janet Leigh, who also starred in Hitchcock films as someone who is organizing the 100th birthday of Antonio Bay.
She's the one that's very mean to her assistant, correct?
Yes.
But
Yeah, that's right.
In the nicest possible way, which is, I think, my favorite joke of the film, when she goes, annoying, but you're right. I just like that delivery is fantastic.
We also have Tom Atkins in this film, who would obviously, we've talked about once on the show because we did Halloween 3.
Yeah.
Which I liked him a lot in Halloween 3,
fantastic
which
in
came
that,
out
yeah.
shortly after
He's great
The
in that
Fog.
movie.
Didn't he do another film that we did?
And he was also in Night of the Creeps.
Right.
That was
Night of the
the
Creeps.
very,
His
very
favorite role.
awesome performance from him as sort of like a detective with scars in that town who finds himself in a splatter film.
Yeah. That was great.
But Trevor, maybe you can walk us through, when did you first watch The Fog? And because I know that The Fog has a bit of a mixed reception, kind of like when it first came out, and even today it's been reclaimed a little, but it's still kind of viewed a little bit lower on Carpenter's to be fair to Carpenter, he has some bangers in his filmography.
I'm kind of, right now, just to say it, because you're talking about it, I'm kind of in that ballpark
You're
right
feeling
now.
a little mixed
where
on it? See, I love it.
And here's the thing, it's like I'm battling more so what I like about the Carpenter movies that I love. You know what I'm saying? Like when I think of Carpenter, I just think of They Live, Halloween, and I like his more high energy stuff, I guess. Even though I think
He's a little bit more bombastic usually.
Yeah, exactly. But the thing is too is that like you can't beat a John Carpenter score, and the score that he comes up with.
This is one of his best scores, unquestionably.
Yeah, you called it
man.
like droning synth.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
it's just like, that's a great description of it, because it just sets you in this slow, creepy pace that he's going for.
Very
And I
hypnotic.
mean, it's very symbolic of like the fog rolling in itself. And
Oh,
stuff
very
like that.
slow
So,
and creepy.
Yeah. So
Very much
I'm just battling myself right now. I think this conversation is kind of going to be
it'll
my,
work. Trevor will
my
make his
final
case.
stamp.
But Trevor,
So,
did you love this film the first time that you watched it?
No, I didn't actually. It has its own very particular charms. I think that you kind of have to meet it on its level a little bit.
Yeah.
And it's kind of odd if you're like, say you're watching like Halloween, The Thing, and going through his whole filmography. It's really kind of like it feels like a lot less. It feels a little more slight than his other films. But I feel like it's definitely, like you said, kind of getting a little more appreciation, along with Prince of Darkness, which is a crime that's been overlooked so much. But I really like that one. I saw it when I was a teenager and didn't really appreciate it. And I've kind of come around on it a lot, especially as I kind of read more classic ghost story authors, like M.R. James. There's one guy, William Hope Hodgson, who just does like pirate ghosts. That's like his whole thing, pirate ghosts and like sea ghosts, all these nautical ghost stories. And John Carpenter's gone on record saying this was his tribute to those kind of really classic, almost antiquated ghost story authors. So, kind of taking that into account and coming to appreciate those authors on my own, I've kind of swung back to it, and I really appreciate it a lot more, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, it opens with an Edgar Allan Poe quote. All that we see or seem is but a dream within a dream. And then he has who's the actor that he has there? Is it John Houseman?
Is it
the
captain
you're right.
kind of guy?
Yeah, playing the guy who's delivering the ghost story at the beginning, which, by the way, apparently was a reshoot. Apparently, John Carpenter, when he
that's crazy because it seems like an established thing that sets the tone.
And apparently 1/3 of this film is reshoots.
Wow,
because he went into his thing and he was like, I like it, but it's not there. And one of the things was he wanted that establishing mood. He's like, he realized watching his own film that he was like, this actually is more about the mood than it is about the plot. So he went back and put in more mood. He put in a little bit more of some of the creepy imagery, a little bit more of like the pirate hands and the makeup effects and stuff like that, which, by the way, done by Rob Bottin, who did the makeup alongside Tom Savini on a couple films. He worked on Maniac. He worked on Dante's The Howling, Legend, RoboCop, Total Recall, all kinds of great stuff. And also, Rob Bottin actually plays the lead pirate, Blake.
Oh, cool.
And John Carpenter apparently selected him for it because he showed up and he was like, how tall are you? And Rob Bottin was like 6'5". He's like, perfect.
You're the ghost pirate, buddy.
I need a really tall, imposing figure.
Yeah.
It kind of says everything that, like, the restraint in that you get Rob Bottin to do your leprous ghost makeup, and they never give you a clear shot of it in this whole film.
No.
It's always in the dark. That's restraint. It's like, this is this specific ghost story mood I'm going to do, and to do like a big effect shot I don't know what effect it would have, but like, he's obviously going for a very specific thing, and just to hide all these like ghosts in the shadows is very indicative of that.
Yeah, I think the most they have is like a 1 second kind of lit shot of the worms coming out of their faces kind of thing, like just of one. Yeah. And that's the most that he gives. The rest of it's just a pure silhouette, except for Blake, who's got these red eyes that he stole. But yeah, it does create an even creepier mood because you never get any real answers. And just not seeing them just always, it creates more mystery, which creates more creepiness.
Well, to me, this plays a lot like Carpenter doing a little bit of a riff on Jaws.
Oh yeah.
Well, just because,
like, in what way?
Well, just because of some of the coastal small town elements. I mean, specifically the hospital scene where you have the two people like talking to each other in the towns, like trying to figure out, is this an emergency? Should we start a panic? Is there something? Yeah. And so a little bit of that, but also in the sort of implied violence of it, because famously, Jaws doesn't show you the shark until the final reel of the film, and it's a pretty long film, actually.
Yeah.
So he has to create a lot of the danger of this film through feeling and mood and sort of like implication and atmosphere, rather than like showing you things, which goes to say about what you guys were talking about, how he doesn't really show you much of the monsters. It's really like this slow, sleepy, kind of moody, hypnotic vibe that it has going for it, with this sort of like, obviously the anamorphic Panavision photography with lots of negative space and lots of use of shadow and color that Carpenter used a lot, but also taking a lot of the stuff that he learned making Halloween.
Yeah.
Which is like, for example, still one of my favorite things when we talked about Halloween is the final images of Halloween. Just those still shots of all of those empty spaces with Michael's breathing, and the way that is so much creepier than anything he could have shown you, because it creates a sort of like cosmic feeling for Michael Myers, where he is anywhere. Your eyes are scanning the frames, fucking looking for his face somewhere. And he does a similar montage here where he has sort of like the fog kind of moving into town, and he has all these small town settings where things just kind of like everything starts kind of like going haywire. It's just these empty spaces and the subtle score, and you're just sitting there waiting, being like, what the fuck is happening? It's all build up. So John Carpenter, I think a lot of people were disappointed by the film because it doesn't quite have a slasher villain, and it doesn't quite have like a sort of like action catharsis, like when Laurie and Michael end up duking it out with Dr. Loomis in the house. It doesn't quite have that, even though there is sort of in the church, but it's not action based. So I think because
they're
of
not
that,
like they're not shooting pirates, ghosts in the face.
Exactly.
They just kind of break in, more or less.
Exactly. So I don't think that it has that quite like visceral quality that people are waiting for the catharsis for the buildup. But I think there's something interesting to that, where the whole film is honestly build up and build up and build up and build up, and it's punctuated very occasionally by just like this very, very sudden violence. And it's telegraphed in his horror images, which are these images of a fog slowly rolling in, and then you have a light start to glow inside of it, and then every once in a while it lights up briefly for a second or two, a figure in it, and then there's this really sharp cutting where all of a sudden a hook goes through a guy's chest, cut to the next scene.
Yeah. And I think that contrast between like what the monsters or the ghosts or whatever are like, as if, you know, they're very slow. It seems like if they don't get to you, they don't really care, but if they get to you, they're gonna rip you to shreds. And there's something about like the slowness and the uncaring of the actual killing to when John Carpenter shows them killing somebody.
Oh, and it's just over.
So viscerally violent, and it's quick, but it's also done with rusty hooks, and you see like a pirate sword go through a guy's chest and things like that.
Yeah.
But it's so quick compared to the build, so that also adds to a lot of tension. And then his score, what he does specifically with the main theme, is he has the same like melody running, but he goes back and forth between clean piano and then synth. And to me, it kind of represents, like, the piano represents the normal town, like when it's kind of just, it's everyday life and all that. And then the synth, he kind of ramps up the reverb a little bit, and it gives me this symbolism of the fog
ghostly
vibe.
In, because the presence.
Right, exactly. And he kind of established that sound a little bit too. I mean, he wasn't the first to do synth, but his synth sound is very, very distinct.
It's instantly recognizable.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So
I also love that this how blatantly this film is about the act of telling stories.
Yeah.
And just like a love letter to like the act of telling ghost stories. Like, not only does it open with that amazing kind of scene of exposition told through like a really beautifully done ghost story, there's also he stops the action I think a quarter to midway into the film when they're in the pirate ship, or not the pirate ship, the ship that's been ravaged by the pirates.
Right, where the one guy is just like, hey, there's no fog out there, and then like 2 seconds later he's like, wait, hold on a second, there's fog out there.
Yeah, and Tom Atkins tells Jamie Lee Curtis like another really creepy little ghost story, and then he follows that right up with a fake out jump scare followed by a real jump scare instantly. It's like
right,
such
and
a
very
masterful
well
scene.
directed scene. Yeah.
And I was gonna say also, while he before he's telling that story, I believe it's cross cutting between them checking the ship out and the priest reading from the journal, which itself is telling a story of his father. Well, that was one of my favorite cross-cutting moments, where they're investigating the ship. This, you know, for the 80s, it's a modern ship, and it's these people going through, you know, this modern town, and then the priest is reading I think it's his grandfather's diary from the inception of the town, and I don't know that I've seen the priest in anything else. But the way that he read that story, I was like, man, I want him to read more stories. Because it's Hal Holbrook.
Hal Holbrook, yeah. He's in Creepshow. He feeds Adrian Barbeau to the monster in the crate. And he is in an amazing underseen horror movie from Canada called Rituals. That's kind of like a riff on Deliverance through like a slasher movie lens. It's really good.
No,
I'll
I
have to
gotta
write
check
that one down
for sure.
Yeah. Sorry, go on.
Sweet. No, that's awesome.
No, but his Father Malone character, I think, is kind of like, for me, a bit of the soul of the film, because he has the most. I mean, he has obviously the biggest revelations in the film, which are
like the strongest connection to the ghosts themselves as well, right?
right, which kind of helps solidify the framework of the whole story, which is this idea of sort of like a foundational sin that a town has sort of built its structures on top of. And you don't realize until halfway through the film, or maybe even 3/4 of the way through the film, like what the town really did, like why these pirates are coming to get them.
Right.
It's just kind of like it has a bit of like a silly, like the story itself is like a little silly. It's leprous ghost pirates coming to kill small townsfolk.
Yeah.
But again, the way that Carpenter creates a mood around it, you almost feel like this collective guilt and sort of like mourning that the town has before you know what it's for.
Yeah.
Which really helps you, for me, helps ground the film's mood, because, you know, there are films that can be pure mood and not have them in service of things. And this, to me, I feel the reverberating guilt of it and the cycles of pain. It has almost like a void-like quality to this like coastal existence, like it's cut off from the rest of the world. And I think it's important too that he separates all those characters. Like you have the radio show host in her booth, you have the hitchhiker and Tom Atkins play characters together, you have the small boy who is Adrian Barbeau's son, and then you have all of these different townsfolk. You have Janet Leigh's character, you have Father Malone, and all of these people they don't talk to each other very much, and they're not connected by anything other than this sin that they committed, which was...
And it's cool, as the movie goes too, it kind of, that sin itself brings them together.
Yes,
and then
exactly.
Right, into the, of course...
right, structurally, that's why it's so important.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
like I think that you're spot on, because it does have them all separated, and then it's connected through this violence that's coming to get them, and you're right, they do end up at a church all together at the end, trying to run away, even though that is exactly where they're going, which they regretfully find out later.
Like I always thought it was kind of weird that they keep Adrienne Barbeau's character from joining the rest of the group. She never leaves the lighthouse or her radio tower. I guess.
Right, because she ends up on top of it, hiding from the ghosts.
Yeah, I almost read that as like she was the, just, I mean, it's I guess the simple reading, but it's like she was kind of the overlooker, the overseer. She was one of the only characters that was really trying to warn everybody else. Like,
and she gets that great monologue at the end of the film too.
Oh yeah, it's fantastic.
Oh, so good.
Watch out for the fog, like that. Yeah, it's great.
That's totally John Carpenter doing a tribute to the last scene in the original Thing from Another World, where they're like, "Watch the skies."
Oh, cool.
Right.
Very cool.
But yeah, she definitely feels like a Greek chorus almost for the rest of the characters and the rest of the film. Like,
she's got and what a voice too, though. I would listen to that radio show. She talks very, very smoothly in between these smooth jazz songs that she's putting on, which, by the way, I found out because this film was incredibly cheap. Apparently it cost $1 million, which even for Carpenter was actually pretty cheap. And he said that the reason they used jazz music was because they couldn't afford rock music. He wanted rock music.
That's hilarious.
Because he's like, I don't really know that there's any small town out there that listens to jazz music. It's mostly there's like rock radio stations in every small town.
Well, it's great because I mean it just adds that mood to her because she's got that really soft and
smoky.
warm voice. Yeah, smoky. That's the word exactly.
Well, and also for me, it creates another weird thing about this town, which does feel for me like really cut off from the world. Like when you get those big vistas where you just get these shots of the ocean like lit up by the moonlight, and he goes back to that shot like 2 or 3 different times, and every time you're like, there's really nothing out there. They are not connected to literally anything.
Yeah. It does feel like kind of feel like the island off of Serenity,
Yeah, so all of these people and this place and these things that they've built are entirely connected by like this lie, by this violence that serves as sort of like a corrupted myth for their township, which is that these pirates are coming to get them because 100 years ago they were asked by these sort of pirates who were lepers, to be able to stay ashore near their township. And I believe it was just so that they could interact with them and get goods and services and like stay alive. They were like, we have gold. We just want to stay nearby. We're not going to come into your town. We know that we're not going to try to infect anybody. Like, we're just trying to survive. And instead, the town decided that they were going to just kill the pirates, eradicating the problem of possible infection, and then stealing all of their money and using that money as a base to actually create their township. And I mean, you get Father Malone, who has that great line where he's like, tonight's celebration is a farce. We are celebrating murderers, and like these really moody lines that come up with John Carpenter's score.
He's the representation of like, it feels like the guilt of the town. More so
because his grandfather is directly related, and his grandfather seemed like the most morally conflicted about what they did, and that's why he wrote it in that diary. And it is creepy to have this guy from another time speaking through his son's voice, this moral anguish that he has over this violence, and then you realize that moral anguish then infects the way you're watching it, because you're like, this is obviously horror, people we like are dying, but there is like an understandable comeuppance happening here, and there is, so it creates a really thorny interaction with your with the killers of the film. So which is just interesting, because obviously in a lot of slasher films and a lot of things that would get popularized because of Halloween, it's like the slasher guy is like evil personified.
For sure.
It's like there's not a lot of reason for what's happening.
Right, and this is that ghostly revenge kind of thing for something that was just horribly done to them. There's something interesting too with the father, because right before, at the end, when he gets cut up by Blake or whatever, he says, "Why not me?" like before he dies. Yeah. And so it almost feels like there's this like really strong guilt that he holds personally.
He almost wants to go.
Yeah, right. And I found that, I mean, I think it is true to his character, because he's constantly worried throughout the thing. I think he feels the most guilt.
Well, it's also
through the connection.
It's also confusion, right? Because they didn't end up actually killing the people he thought they were going to kill.
True, right. It's like, why did those people die and not me? What is the answer here? Right. I get what you're saying.
Yeah. But yeah, it's interesting, because as soon as you have that context, all of a sudden, all of the horror sequences just take on like a different quality. Like, you're watching these slow moving images. Again, there's these slow figures moving through the fog, or the fog starts coming underneath the door, and then the glowing light that he puts on it. Again, with his score ramping up. Like, I just find that I sit through this film, and even though, you know, he even admits that he doesn't think that like the plot is like next level or anything.
No,
I just find myself like really feeling this film, even more than some other Carpenter films. I find that this is just like one of the most like intoxicating like mood piece style films that he's ever made.
Mood piece.
It really does feel like that ghost story, because like when you think about a ghost story, like something that you would tell around a campfire, they don't have the most detailed characters with huge development arcs and stuff, right?
Yeah,
so it makes sense that this would be so concentrated just on the mood, the creep factor, the ghosts themselves, really just the ghost story.
Right, and when you talk about like a campfire ghost story vibe, like most people will know what you're talking about, even if you don't tell them what the story is.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's the kind of vibe I think that he was really going for in here, just with his own sort of synth drone kind of musicality to some of the images. Even on the way
of like when you're telling a campfire story, like the way that he plots out violence and stuff, even in a campfire story, it's very slow. Like you couldn't, it would be very difficult to tell the thing around a fire, you know? He definitely, he pulls off that vibe wholeheartedly for sure.
He was definitely like directing to that mold. He definitely like knew exactly what he wanted to make and the beats that he had to hit to get that feeling across. And I think he definitely accomplished that.
Yeah.
And one of the best things about John Carpenter is always that like he has a specific idea about whatever movie he's going to do, and he just does it, and he doesn't really give a fuck if you don't like it. It's kind of exactly what he wanted to do, and he did it. Yeah.
Well, and I mean, even some of the individual like horror sequences in here, like the one in the hospital, for example.
All the early sequences in this movie are my absolute favorite parts. All the weird, just ghost shit happening in the first like hour are the best part of this whole movie.
Yeah, like where nobody kind of knows what's happening. It's just the things that they look at, the things that are normal, these small town locations.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, they just feel off. There's something wrong about them. You're not sure what it is. It's kind of like the town has that like poisoned sickness quality to it, like before anything is even happening.
He opens on people just doing their normal day-to-day jobs. Like a guy's in a variety store, he's just sweeping up, and you can tell that it's a closing because like all the lights are off, but the only thing that's lighting him is the freezer light.
Yes.
And then like things start to move on their own, and it's just it's weird because it's things you've seen before in the sense of like the way he applies ghost creepiness.
Oh yeah, it's like phones ringing, and you're like,
but it's the way he paces it. It's unbelievable. And then of course John Carpenter's score. So it adds to that atmosphere.
But yeah, like that montage of
the score is amazing.
The sirens and the TV static and like the radios and the horns, and at one point like the gasoline handle comes off and starts leaking, and a car starts launching up, chairs start sliding across the room. The way that he just kind of builds to like a crescendo of objects moving, and it's fucking terrifying. And not like sometimes you see it in horror movies now, and you're kind of like, oh, the chair moved. But like the vibe here, it like is like genuinely creepy and off kilter, and does create this weird kind of like feeling of like isolation and alienation for these characters, and nobody talks to each other about it.
It's so matter of fact. It's just like the score, I think, in those opening scenes is barely minimal or not even there. And it's just like, it just happens. It's just all these different things happening around town, like kind of unremarked upon. It makes it really makes it creepy.
Yeah, that was something I noticed too, is that when he's showing all of these just normal everyday things, but there's a slight creepy factor to it, whether it be a chair moving or whatever. He didn't have a score under this, and from Carpenter, I'm always used to something, a little, maybe a synth pad, something like that, and he had nothing. He's just like, no, we want complete silence. We want the ambience of that silence and the ambience of something just crashing to the floor when you're least expecting it. And it's incredibly effective.
Well, and he also does that thing that we talked a lot about in Halloween, where he takes really good advantage of the widescreen frame and the negative space in all of his frames.
Yeah.
Where he shoots in a way that trains you to investigate his images for things, to look for them.
Sure.
The way that you're searching for Michael in that film. Here, there's images like on the boat when the massacre of the boat guys happens, and there's this really, really dark shot that takes place inside the boat while the guy's trying to call for help. And you just get this completely black frame in the background, and every once in a while this like kind of like almost like strobe light just hits, and there's a figure, and you can just make out the edges of his shoulders as he's moving closer and closer and closer. And again, he holds these shots for like an unbearable amount of time. And for some people, I think that read as kind of like, I know that Roger Ebert wasn't a particular fan of this film, and he said something along the lines of that he wanted it to move. He was like, why isn't it moving? Like Halloween had like a kind of like a trajectory that he could follow, and this has like a stranger pace to it. But
it's like
for me,
waiting for the death to come.
Well, exactly, and for me, that's exactly the point of those images, and that's what's scary about them. Is it's an inevitability. There's a fatalism to just like the way he's crafted the images, that you're sitting there just waiting for the worst thing to happen, and then again the sudden punctuation of hook through someone, sword through someone, or in that scene where they almost get Jamie Lee Curtis. Because what's even that's one of the creepier ones is when it's in broad daylight and you can just see the corpse moving in the background, just getting up, grabbing the scalpel or whatever it's grabbing.
That part.
And then its feet drop on the floor and it's walking closer, and then she turns around and it just falls, and it's like, I wasn't doing anything.
Fake out.
Yeah, so and again, those scares are just they're very unique. And in their pacing and their imagery to Carpenter, and I think it's what makes Carpenter so special, even if you don't particularly latch on to a specific character and you really love the emotional catharsis of the film. Like, I don't know that that's as much here as it is in some other Carpenter films, like something like Prince of Darkness I find very emotionally affecting. So, but for me, I don't know that I emotionally connect to a lot of the ghost stories I know either. It's really is all about that tone. to it, and if we're going based on that, I think this is like exceptionally made.
Yeah, it really is. I think you just have to have that thought of it's a campfire
mindset kind of
ghost
going
story.
in. Yeah.
If you do have that, like, if you're going in thinking you're going to get The Thing, Halloween, that kind of thing, it's not going to happen. It will kind of disappoint you. But I will say, I don't know if we're wrapping it up for The Fog, but this conversation's convinced me that I like it quite a bit. So
that's good.
Yeah.
That's how we do it. Peer pressure, folks.
Yeah, exactly. Not to say that I disliked it. I really liked it. It's always been very close to the 4.
Yeah, but I think Trevor was right when he just said that, like, you kind of do have to meet this movie a bit on its own wavelength with what it's doing.
Yep, absolutely.
Because the third act, which does, it does have a little bit of stuff going on. I mean, I think what a fantastic image, that image of the cross heating up.
Oh my God!
And Blake holding it with his hands and like steaming as like this pure black silhouette with eyes.
Oh, that's amazing!
Yeah,
like it's what a creepy fucking image, just in its own way.
Yeah.
But there is a bit of like, oh, they went away for some reason.
Yeah,
and then,
for sure. I mean, they do have that nice little like, the priest gets the whack or whatever, and then they cut to the credits.
At the very end there. Yeah,
I think but it did seem more like a, have that ghost ending, where there's a bit of a scare at the end. I don't know if it directly connected to the rest of what we watched.
Yeah, well, and I wasn't sure if it was implying that they were going to come back and also get everyone else now too.
Yeah, it seemed like that was specifically for the priest, which was odd. So I don't know, hard to say.
But I think it was definitely just like solving this issue wasn't that easy. It was like, you could give back the gold, but at this point it's not just about the gold. There's something sicker and deeper and more.
Because I mean, for 100 years you've been building this town on that,
right.
Like just giving back this gold statue.
Well, it was like everything you have came from this, right? And
sure.
Also kind of just the image of like a pure gold cross is just kind of funny. It feels like a little counterintuitive.
Definitely.
But that image too.
I love that final scene because it's like I love the final scene, the little stinger at the very end, because it's the equivalent of like telling a ghost story on a campfire and then like turning to the person next to you and going, "Bah!"
Yeah. Oh, that's a great analogy. I love that.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that now. That's awesome. I didn't even think of that.
But I also love that image, that wide shot of the church with them all standing amongst the pews as the fog slowly moves in and the light starts to get like these like overblown white start like kind of like piercing through the darkness. Again, you never really get a good clear look at them, but the figures are there and there is something physical to them that you can't quite ignore in the image.
For sure.
And then obviously it's implied all the time that they could fucking grab you with a hook at any second. You never know when that hook's coming.
Yeah.
You're sitting there waiting for that hook to come. But yeah,
they'll even take the grandma babysitters, man. They don't care who it is.
So yeah, I do say I think I would understand if someone found like the church sequence and the way that they kind of give the gold back and then they disappear, and then it kind of has that effect for Andrea, who's at this point sitting on top of the radio tower hiding from the ghost lepers. Yeah. Really well done cross-cutting between those two scenes. It's really creepy.
Yeah, as they get closer and closer to her.
But it does have that kind of like Phantom Menace thing where it's like they take out the mothership and then they all fall and they all go away.
Sure,
so like there is definitely something to that where it does.
I think I could forgive it a lot easier on this one because of like I would think that a ghost ship would be kind of connected. You know what I mean?
Right.
They're all together. Sense, they're all buddies.
They were in Pirates of the Caribbean, right? With the
this had, by the way, that had to be inspired by this film.
Yeah.
Like without a doubt.
No, like all the creepy images of the skull pirates, like moving in the moonlight
at night in the fog, easily. Yeah,
no way that it wasn't inspired partially by Carpenter's vision here.
Has to be.
Yeah.
But when they finish that off and they go back into that mood and that monologue that Andrea has, where she said something came out of the fog and tried to destroy us. Look across the water.
Look out
into the darkness. Look for the fog. It could come again. And just that idea of looking across the water into the darkness, something's out there.
Yeah.
you realize that like that is what's scary about this story.
Absolutely.
It doesn't need a Michael Myers. There's something bigger. And even then, when he made Michael Myers, the whole idea was that he was bigger than just a human person. That's what's scary about him.
Truly the boogeyman.
Yeah, and so that's what he does here with the fog too, is he creates something scarier and darker, and then it comes back and decapitates Father Malone, and the fog does come back, so you're like, oh fuck. So yeah, and entering the reductive rating round, which for you, Trevor, is where we remove all the words, all the nuance, and reduce the movie to a number between 1 and 5. But also it's kind of become closing statements and or any
Anything
scenes or lines or anything that we didn't get to that you wanted to bring up, we do it here as well. But for me, this gets like a pretty decent to high 4 for me, honestly, because I this is my second time watching it. We actually watched it for the first time together on my Blu-ray.
Yeah, a few months ago. I think.
And I just, for some, and not just for some reason, because of craft. John Carpenter's doing something intentionally here.
It's the craft.
But I do find myself, like, more so than even some other Carpenter films, like, really feeling this film. Like, I sit there and I watch it and I get swept up viscerally into it, even though I realize that that's mostly out of just him holding onto a shot, the way that he chose his shot, the way that he sort of like formally contributes this like synth drone music into these like really creepy, slow, sleepy images. And when I put that it was like got like real slow, sleepy campfire vibes from it, some smart ass commented to me and was like, "Yeah, it puts me to sleep too, man," or something. And I was like,
not a bad joke.
No, it got a good laugh out of me. But I do think that the way that he structures that feeling and he structures that quality into the actual story itself and this town, it really does feel like you are getting the collective guilt of an entire town, and you can feel it reverberating through the town, that there's this waiting, almost like they're waiting for the punishment that they kind of like know that they deserve. There's something that they know that they're guilty, which is what I think also is Father Malone in that last scene being like, why didn't you take me? Like, I know that there's more to this here. And the way that he structures it as like this very lonely movie of all these characters alienated from one of each other in a small physical distance from each other. I mean, I don't know that Andrea talks to anyone outside of her tower other than her son. And
I don't think she does.
And Dan, because they have that.
Well, yeah, but only over the phone. She refuses to go on a physical date with him. I think she even says, "My perfect date is like talking to someone on the phone."
My perfect man is a voice over the phone. Or
yes,
something. And I was like, by the way, smoothest way to say no to a date I've ever heard. Like, god damn, that's putting him down in a cool way.
Yeah, so the way that he structures that loneliness into these characters' lives, and then has them realize why they feel alienated and lonely, and it's because their entire existence is founded on just like these actual violence and this corruption for their township. So again, there's like a dark foreboding undercurrent to this town, and you kind of feel the fact that it's sick and it's dread-inducing, even like before you know why. And then he slowly paints a portrait of why. And what's weird, I guess, is that nothing, like, I think that's why people are, because it's structured to get to the reveal.
Yeah.
And then they get punished, and that's it.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people wanted something more, that maybe they wanted redemption. And it is interesting that Carpenter doesn't give that to them. It just goes, no, your ancestor did something terrible, and you're suffering for it, and that's life. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
So, but to me, that is like a very creepy, scary thing. And again, the way that he structures that into, this ghost story, and as Trevor was putting it, kind of bringing back this sort of creepy storytelling parable kind of horror quality to it. So yeah, for me, solid to high 4. Yeah,
for me, it is on a bit right now, because this is going from the 3. I did have it at a 3 the first time I watched it, but this time it is going to get the 4. It's still, upgrade. I would say, a little lower, just because I just don't feel this one as much in the sense of like the the characters and all that. But like we've said, it doesn't really seem like the point. I think that he's just trying to really represent what like a ghost story around a campfire, like we've said, feels like. Mm-hmm. And I mean, So for me, I think what I love about this film is the craft itself. Like, just the way that he paces these things, the way that he slowly unveils to you the story of the ghosts, the way that he opens it up with this awesome split diopter shot of the
watch,
pocket watch and the kids. Like, that shit was unreal. That was such a great way to open it up and set the tone. And yeah, this one for me is the craft. It's the score that he brings with it that I think really symbolizes both the town and the creepy factor.
Honestly, this is one of the scores that he does that I listen to just on its own pretty regularly.
For sure, because it's got a different mood than some of his other ones. Like the other ones, they feel like they just feel a little bit more in your face. The melody, it seems to be like, remember me.
Yeah. This one has like a bit of like a flittery sound to it. It's a little bit more restrained.
Yeah, it's an atmosphere.
And then he brings in that darker bass undercurrent where it's like.
For sure. So yeah, for me, it's a lower 4, but it's getting there, and gotta respect the craft of Carpenter. So yeah.
For you, Trevor.
I'm feeling pretty much the same. Depending on the day, this viewing brought it up to like a good mid-level 4, honestly. Like, it's still going to pale a little bit with if you compare it to some of the other John Carpenter films, just because he's that good. But
that he is.
It has its own particular flavors that are really nice. You guys covered it really nicely in terms of like, it's obviously focusing on the imagery and the craft and this very almost meditative pace.
Yes.
But they all work so well together. I feel like if he was trying for character stuff, that would be a problem with this, because there isn't a huge, amazing plot and amazing characters, but that's not what he's going for here. I think it's pretty obvious.
Right.
But just the imagery that he accomplishes in the story, all the weird like ghostly events in the early part of the film are just so cool and contribute so nicely to the atmosphere. Yeah, especially the score. The score stands out of this one so much. If you notice too, like the score for this has the ticking of the watch from the opening scene through the whole movie. So it's almost like
awesome.
It's almost like a continuation of the story that he was telling in the opening scene of the film.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, it's just really good. It's not The Thing or Halloween or Prince of Darkness, and I think that's gonna hurt a lot of people, especially if they go in expecting anything like those movies. But it's just its own thing, and it does it really well, and it doesn't ask anything else but that. And so I'd say like a solid 4, like 3.94 kind of level.
Sweet.
Yeah, well, and I mean, it definitely, for Carpenter, it's one of his more like restrained, like patient films.
Oh yeah.
Which I guess is kind of like what might throw people off. And I think you're right too to point out that the idea that if it would have really like tried to sink into characters, it might have bitten off a little too much, because the story almost feels like the mood of the town,
and the kind of like the condensed time. Like this movie's what, like 89 minutes or something like that.
Yeah.
Like it's all of it seems to be on purpose and necessary for the craft that he's going for.
Yeah, and that
totally
the formal like precision and like the grace of what he's doing and how it achieves that like existentialism of the town. Mm-hmm. It's very, very.
It's a good way to point it out. To put it, it's very precise. It's a precise film.
Yeah. Yep.
Hell yeah! And people weren't crazy about it at the time, but its reputation, I think, has been growing since it came out.
And we're
even
here
if it hasn't grown quite as much as like something like The Thing, which was like not very well received when it came out, and is now considered his masterpiece.
Still upset about it.
So
yeah,
we'll see. You never know. We'll get there. People are starting to reclaim like In the Mouth of Madness and other ones that they should be. I mean, we're going to be, spoiler alert, we are going to be talking about Prince of Darkness on the show in the next couple months. And it is on, usually if I rewatch it, it is my favorite Carpenter film.
Nice.
If it's like, sometimes I'll rewatch the thing and I'll be like, maybe that's my favorite. But most of the time, if I'm sitting there and I'm distanced from all of his films for a little while, I'm like, it's Prince of Darkness.
Oh,
it's the one I find genuinely.
Well, it gets me excited because that's one I still have a blind spot for. So
no, you don't.
Oh, it's such a good movie. It's so good.
Oh, that's
we watched it, brother.
Yes. No, I remember. I'm sorry. I do remember, because it's got an amazing ending. an incredible ending.
Yeah, the
God.
shot of the hand.
Yeah, now I remember.
And,
That's my bad.
It's the closest Carpenter got to doing almost like Italian horror with some of the stuff that he's doing there.
Yeah,
Totally.
I think it's because we didn't do it on the show that I just like let it out of my
Now, every
brain.
once in a while, we watch one and we're like, we're not even going to think about it for the show.
Yeah,
We're just
yeah,
going to watch
that's
something for
probably
fun.
because we didn't have an hour conversation on it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That being
great
said,
movie.
I guess that will wrap it up for The Fog here. We're going to be right back, and we're going to be talking Dead and Buried.
You can't. You can only make me dead. Go on. Pull the trigger. Perhaps you need a little more motivation.
Dan, I'm dead. Please bury me.
Dead and Buried. The movie you'll want to see. If you dare to look.
Bury me.
Dead and Buried.
All right, we are talking Dead and Buried, the 1981 American horror film directed by Gary Sherman, who we have previously talked about in the show, in his kind of like scuzzy 80s neon detectives versus
insanity.
prostitutes slash a little bit of like a serial killer. I think it's like a
You can call him that for sure.
I don't. What a
So
guy!
you're gonna see this one.
We'll say that.
Oh,
called
Vice Squad is just
it was something.
ape shit.
What did we paired that with Cruising when we did that pretty early on in the
perfect.
show.
Right, yeah.
So that's kind of like the vein that it's in. But Dead and Buried stars honestly a bunch of actors I haven't seen in a whole lot of things.
Yeah,
except
me neither.
I kept getting a little bit distracted because James Ferrento, who plays the main character, Dan Gillis, he reminded me of Peter Falk a little bit, like Columbo.
Oh, okay.
I can see it.
I'm pretty sure the isn't the doctor or the coroner Mortimer
Jack Albertson?
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
from fucking Willy Wonka, right?
Yeah, he's the grandpa from Willy
I was
Wonka.
just like, and I mean, I won't spoil it yet, but as this film goes, I'm just like,
What
oh
a
my
role.
God, Grandpa Jack, what are you doing?
and I believe, if not his very last role, one of his last roles
oh wow,
for sure before he passed.
Well, he went out with a bang. I'll tell you that.
We'll say that, yeah. But largely, the film follows Sheriff Dan Gillis, who is the sheriff in a small town called Potter's Bluff, which, similar to The Fog, has to be a reference to fucking Pottersville.
Yeah.
Which we just watched it on film. It's a Wonderful Life.
Right.
So very small town, rural America. But Potter's
and they
Bluff
really
sign,
do come together.
They
you know?
do, for sure. And the Potter's Bluff sign says "A New Way of Life."
Yeah.
Which is not untrue. I'll give them credit for it. But what happens over the course of this film, sort of loosely, is that a sort of like series of these like really grisly murders that are dressed up to not really look like murders. Like they'll put people in car accidents, and try to disguise it, but they are committed by sort of mobs of random town people against kind of like tourists visiting the town.
Yeah. And what I found interesting is like, I would think it would be one of those things. It's like maybe people that come in and try to change something or corrupt it or whatever. But these people will fucking take out people
Anybody.
driving through. They're like, they're just like, hey, I need directions to the next town. And they're like, we got to kill these people. I don't know what to do. I just found that very fascinating that it wasn't really connected to like a, I mean, we unveil later, but initially I was like, why are they doing all this crazy shit?
There are twists to the film that appear, I mean, multiple ones that appear in the last 5 to 10 minutes of the film. But what's so interesting I found about this film right away is that obviously it's got like a mood atmosphere aspect to it as well, opening on like these old-timey like still photographs of the town,
right.
Which actually reminded me a lot of, because I come from a very small town in Ontario, and I recently found a bunch of really old postcards.
Oh yeah.
And I bought them and framed them for my parents for Christmas, of like just like the lake and these and like the local docks and like the downtown, which looks the exact same except in these postcards that had like horse and buggies on it. And
ours is like that too.
Yeah. So that's what it reminded. What the image is straight up what it looked like was just like a still frame of like an old postcard from the small town, which is important because it kind of represents like this idea of like a picture perfect ideal, like literally, of like a small town. And it opens with that, and then has this awesome the sequence where like this photographer is taking pictures of this beach, and how this beach has personality because there's this local stuff that's kind of like washed up onto it. He's taking photos. He even meets this girl who's in like this beautiful red shirt, who's like
very flirtatious,
very flirtatious, and she's letting him take photos.
It's kind of a different genre for a minute or two there.
Yes, very, very briefly, that shirt goes whoops, and it goes right off. But suddenly, during that like picture perfect photography afternoon, beautiful woman there, an entire crowd of locals appears on the beach.
What a flip too! You think you're getting laid, and then all of a sudden you're gang beaten.
They beat the shit out of him.
Jesus.
They strap him up to a post with a fishing net, douse him in gasoline, and light him on fire as he fucking screams. And that's like the opening scene of the movie.
Yeah,
and it was just
that's
so
to
interesting.
Establish the tone.
Exactly, and that's so upfront. They don't, not for a second,
they don't
pretend.
hide a face. They don't anything.
No.
Yeah.
So that's what's so interesting about the film, is that the film really reveals to you what is happening right
away
in the opening scene. It doesn't be like, who's killing these people? We know. They even show you when the sheriff, Dan, goes to the diner and gets his coffee, that the waitress who gives him his coffee is one of the girls who murdered him.
Yeah, and she's acting all like, oh my God, I can't believe someone died.
And then there's like a close-up on her face as it like
I actually
moves
kind of thought it was
her.
kind of interesting. The name of the town kind of gives away the whole plot, because Potter's Bluff is like a Potter's Field is where they bury dead bodies, and a bluff is a big deception.
Nice. Yeah. No,
I didn't catch that.
Yeah, I'm dumb.
I've seen it like 90 times, so like, eventually I was like, oh, I get it.
Yeah, that's great. Actually, that's awesome.
But it's just so interesting to me that it reveals all this to you up front, and then still manages to like fuck with you, and still manages because you spend the rest of the movie being like, what the hell is going on? I've never seen a horror movie operate in like the realm of like, here's the killers in the opening scene.
Right.
What the fuck is going on?
Because that's what I was doing the first like 30-45 minutes. I was kind of going, what is the mystery? Because I know that there's something here that I don't know, but I couldn't even figure out like what I was looking for or anything like that. You're pretty much in the perspective of Dan the whole time, right?
Yes.
Like, and that I found very interesting. It was very, I was just intrigued from start to finish because of that. Because establishing the killer right away, and it makes it almost like the mystery is reversed. Instead of, finding out who the killer is, we're finding out why this is happening, what's going on, all the background behind it. So that was very intriguing.
Yeah, well, because I've really just never seen like a zombie film operate in this way, because ultimately it was revealed that that's what this is. There is reanimated corpses, and that's what is coming back and killing these people, and maybe that's also how they're building their masses. We'll get into some more of the specifics of those plot elements when we get closer to the end. But when you operate on the fact that this is like a zombie film, it doesn't have a quality to it that reminds you of that. It does feel like a small town American rural film has been infected a tiny bit by a Romero film. Right. But even more so...
It's more like The Wicker Man for a lot of the
honestly,
time.
It's like The Wicker Man and like Invasion of the Body Snatchers at the same fucking time.
Yeah.
Which is like a
crazy
a weird fucking quality to have. Because honestly, Wicker Man, when some of the small town rituals start coming out, the most Wicker Man scene in the entire film is that classroom scene.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And I love how he's like... I love how he's admiring her because he's like in love or whatever. He's like, oh, he's just teaching the children, the next generation, all that. And then she starts like, and then you rip the heart out and you bury it. And his face, the turn is just, oh my God, it's fantastic.
Yeah, because she's like, oh, she's being cute. She's teaching the kids about the idea that, people write zombie stories. There's a history there.
Yeah.
And then instead she's talking about the very specifics of reanimating corpses and how it's done. And
and all the kids have like smiles on their face as they're like, learning the ritual and shit.
Yeah, again, that has a very creepy Wicker Man thing to it. But and I don't really know exactly why I got this vibe in the early scenes, but I was sitting there going, and there's something just so strange and off-kilter about the interactions he has with people, which is obviously part of Invasion of the Body Snatchers in that, like, they're snatching bodies, and so he's interacting with things that aren't really there.
Right.
There's a weird quality to those interactions. He doesn't feel like he's talking to a person. So it has a little bit of that, but I was reminded, because of the weirdness of it, I was reminded a little bit of the way that like Fulci characters will talk to each other.
Sure.
And I got a little bit of a Fulci vibe from it. And then a needle goes through someone's eye, and I was like, okay, well, that's just Fulci.
100%, 100%. That was one of the that was a shrill up moment, where I was just kind of like, oh my god, that was visceral. Like because the detail, like they show
the makeup effects,
the entire syringe just go into the guy's eye, and then it's
unlike
held
Carpenter,
there.
this is not implied violence.
No,
this is the
very
full explicit and
cutting people's
makeup here
throats
done by Stan Winston, who's very famous, but very famous because he does very specific creature designs. Usually, he's not usually the overall makeup artist. He's kind of like the guy who does. He's brought into a job because they're like, we got a difficult fucking character you got to pull off.
Yeah,
they call in this guy. He did the Terminator. The actual
Predator.
Terminator. Yeah, he did Predator. He did Danny DeVito in Batman Returns.
Oh my god.
He did all the toys in Small Soldiers. He did the alien in Aliens.
Holy shit.
That
means business.
Yeah, he's done some crazy stuff, and so he does a lot of them. He did the makeup for this film and the gore effects, like that dude who.
It shows.
The guy who gets acid poured into his nostrils, right?
Yeah. And then it just comes pouring out of like every
his
orifice
eyelids,
of his body.
his mouth, and it's melting through his face.
And they freeze on it too. Like it's not one of those things where it's like a 3-second. The entire time that he's getting acid put into his body, the shot is just stationary right on his face. It never lets up. It's unbelievable. And
then
also
you even get
shows
the full recreation of the corpse, like towards the end. It's just him showing off. Honestly, it's so well done.
That was one I was gonna include because I even put in my notes that it looks legitimately real. It's unbelievable. Yeah. Like when he pulls the eyelid. And then puts the eyes in and everything. Like at that point, I'm like, I couldn't believe it. Yeah, like I truly could not believe those special effects.
Yeah, no, that part's great too, and that introduces us to the mortician character played by Jack Albertson, who is the grandpa from Willy Wonka,
Uncle Joe.
Yes, and
right, Uncle Joe.
It's interesting watching his character because he becomes kind of like the most interesting character in the film once it's revealed like. That he's kind of like behind a lot of what's happening here. But you do get some early vibes from him early in the film where he's talking about the idea of being a mortician as artistry. The idea of recreating a body for a funeral is like really important. He's like, this is art. I'm the artist. He's like, what, do you remember the box? He's like, the body is the memory. And an interesting development is that eventually we'll get into an entire plot where while they're murdering the people, one detail really kept fucking with me, and that was that they kept taking photos. And I was trying to figure out why the fuck they were taking photos, and then I realized closer to the end that it's like the most important thing that they do in the fucking film because they take those photos so that he can recreate their bodies from the photos. So then he's getting to the idea of the body is memory, but then also pictures are memory. Yeah. And then the pictures become flesh, and then he's recreating them through the photos, and then it gets into a really interesting idea about a zombified like culture, like mimicking a time that doesn't really exist out of comfort. It actually reminded me a little bit. We just talked about it recently. A Boy and His Dog.
Oh, nice.
Because of that really creepy bunker with the clowns underground.
Right. It's like this established society where they've all agreed upon this kind of gross way of living.
Yeah, they're trying to relive like waspy pre-World War II America.
And they'll kill anything that might stop it.
Well, and they are, to do it, they are willing to like Frankenstein it together. Using like this really like fascist order in order to do it, even
to
though
just uphold this kind of illusion,
this image,
this societal illusion.
So when you realize like that's where, when I found out that was where this film was going, and then the way that it uses sort of like found footage in the last like 10 minutes, and the way that
it's interesting. I don't think I've seen a zombie film with like snuff footage. Like it was giving me 8mm vibes at a certain point.
Yes. So like that really like took this film to like the next level for me, because there is like a really creepy small town, like sort of like Gothic foggy coastal town thing that obviously Carpenter was doing a little bit in The Fog.
Yeah.
But taking it into this like City of the Living Dead, Wicker Man, Invasion of the Body Snatchers all combined, it was throwing my brain through like a loop. I couldn't believe this is like
especially the last half hour. Like, oh my fucking god!
And I mean, even the way that Sherman directs it with like this really like compositional stillness and deep focus that obviously resembles photographs, which is the thing that he's going for. And then also like this very small town cobble, like rocky beaches, and that eventually gives way to like this really like grimy basement cobweb gothic kind of thing that he's going for.
I also love the image of it's when that family goes and they crash their car, and then
that part's so good.
Yeah, it's great because they have this awesome part where they show all the townspeople walking in a group towards them, and all they're silhouetted, and all you can really see is the light from a street light. And it's interesting because they're moving slowly, so it gives you this vibe of like zombies, but you know that they're just normal townspeople. And so it's kind of got this weird, evil hive brain thing going on.
Right.
And it's a great image. Really good image.
No, there's a lot of really creepy set pieces. I mean, I think obviously the opening one is terrifying, but even that brief bit where they find him in the accident and and we're watching the lead character, the sheriff, who thinks he's coming across an accident, but there's a dramatic irony to it where like we know that this guy wasn't killed in an accident. We watched his murder because they revealed it to us.
Yep.
And then the way that he's still he turns his head, which is like a little bit charred, a little bit stripped of skin. You can see the muscle and you can see the eye and you can see the teeth and the gums. And then he just screams into the camera.
And I think that there's something there that's just saying it's like, even he knows that this is an unnatural thing. Like this is not what is being presented to him. Because I mean, you'd think as a cop, granted it's a small town, so maybe he hasn't dealt with many really violent things, that he wouldn't look at a dead body and scream unless he was very taken back by it, you know? So I thought that was an interesting thought.
Well, no, because isn't it the body that screams at
him?
the
body screams.
Oh.
Yeah, the body's alive. And
I misread it then. That's my bad.
No, it's because the body...
I thought it was either Dan or Hobbs. That's what I thought.
because the corpse actually, upside down, turns its head towards the camera and opens its mouth, and that's when the scream comes.
Okay, right. So I just misread it then, okay.
But still, like again, that is even more to your point. Like that's incredibly unnatural.
Yeah.
and that would be something he definitely hasn't seen.
Yeah.
It has one of my
definitely hasn't seen
one of my favorite one of my favorite horror images in general. Like it's always stuck with me is when in that earlier part you were talking about, when the family crashes their car and they're exploring like this abandoned house. And there's just you keep seeing people move by the windows behind them. You know, the townspeople are after them. There's a shot where the father of the family like opens the door to reveal another room with a door at the far end. And just as he's closing the door, you see the opposite door start to open, but you don't get to see anything else. And it's just so masterfully done. It's like such a perfect...
Great.
Oh, so good.
Yeah, that sequence was really good. The only thing I didn't quite like about the house sequence with the family was just after they knocked on the door for help and then opened the door and then went into the building and then saw all the cobwebs and shit, you're kind of like, this isn't the home. You know, this isn't this isn't the house that's going to help you. Maybe just go to the next door neighbors or something, but they just insist and keep going inside. But I mean, it's, you know, at that point, who really cares? I'm nitpicking, but I thought it was funny.
Doesn't it go from their car like leaving town ostensibly, and then it like crash cuts to their car being drenched out of a river with all them dead?
Yeah,
that's so good.
Yeah. Oh man.
No, like there's a lot of like the way that this works as a procedural that technically we already know the answers to gives this like a really strange way of watching it.
Yeah.
Where you're watching these killings happening, it's not shying away from obviously who's doing it. Like even that bit where the girl who kills him in the opening scene is dressed up as a nurse, and they hold that wide shot of the nurse walking into the room that they just walked out of, and that's when she brings the needle in and stabs him in the eye with the fucking needle, and then like quickly walks out.
And they kind of use her throughout the film as like just one of the main people that seems to do a lot of the killing. Like she's even near the end when Dan is being revealed all the stuff that's going on. She's the one that is the last to say, I'm sorry about your wife or whatever when that whole scene is happening, and then attacks him. So there's something about her every time that she, after the first scene where she, kind of brings that photographer in, as soon as she's on screen, you just get the chills. You're just like, something off is going to happen.
Well, and I got to confess, Dan's a little slow.
Yeah,
He's a little. I mean, he had to uncover some weird shit. I'll give him credit. I couldn't have predicted where the film was going.
Yeah, I didn't.
But
that kind of plays into the final reveal, I guess, of the film.
Yeah.
Well, and he but he finds witchcraft and voodooism. Book with a dagger in his wife's sleeping drawer, and is like, "Hey, what's up? What's up with this?" And she's just like, "Oh, it's for the students." I'm gonna
not even more suspicious.
It was like, that's weirder.
I'd prefer it to be just for you, actually.
Yeah. And then she also gives him the film reel to go and get developed. And when you find out what's on that film, you're like,
that's
girl,
a really sinister
why
act.
didn't you just develop it yourself?
Yeah. You're really just trying to mess him up here.
She's like, yeah, I'm trying to teach the students about narrative.
So we got this Satan book.
I do love how the found footage kind of elements of this film play into it being a procedural, where you're with Dan for the whole film, so it's him putting these clues together. I really like that the element that film reel plays in the finale, having it up on the big screen at the very end. Yes. It's very dramatic.
I also like how they it reminded me of don't they do that in Lost Highway, the David Lynch movie, where where he comes in at the end and it shows his wife having sex with somebody over and over again on a screen.
Oh yeah,
it kind of gave me those vibes a little bit. But also, I love the way that they present the film, because they show you at the first time, which is the first big reveal, is that his wife has been dead the whole time, and she was recreated, and that she was
in the same process that Jack Albertson has been. So the mob has been killing tourists, and then they take them to the mortician, and the mortician
adds them to the population.
Exactly. He reanimates the bodies. He controls them using the heart. So instead of burying their bodies, they bury their hearts in their caskets, in which he controls them. And through that montage where he shows you rebuilding that one girl, which is one of the craziest makeup effects of the thing, where piece by piece through these dissolved images, it
just fades into the layers.
Well, and it starts with him peeling her face off.
Yeah.
And
starting from scratch.
Yeah, going to the skull and then starting from scratch and then lifting the eyelid with no eye in it. It's fucking
it's batshit.
Disgusting as shit. And then that's when he goes to the guy with the flesh of the bodies, and he's like, yeah, this body's been dead for 3 or 4 months. And that one really creepy scene too that I wanted to hit before we get to that big climax,
for sure,
where he's talking to the guy who tells him that, hey, it must be the CSI guy who is in the town. I don't know why the town has a guy like that.
Doesn't he
it wouldn't help them
out of town?
Oh yeah, maybe he does, because he went to the city for his degree in criminology, so he probably calls a guy in. But that's the guy who gets his face acidically melted by sending acid up his nostrils.
Oh yeah.
And the thing is the next scene where he talks to him is post that happening.
Right.
So that's
shit.
That's the first time it hit me that was what was really happening.
Yeah.
When he goes back and he talks to the guy who we just watched his face melt.
And
we know that guy's face just fucking melted.
Right, because we do see this weird thing where after he recreates the girl, does it from scratch, he leaves, and then it shows this dark figure that seems to touch her or do something. I can't really remember. But then she gets up, and so you have this 1 second reveal a little bit, and then it just starts to slowly give you more answers. But they do such a good job of just pacing this unveiling, because this whole time, every single time they gave me an answer, I was satisfied, and I was just wanting so much more. And then
I'll save more questions.
Yeah, I'll save.
Well, what I was gonna say, and that totally leads us into the really big finale stuff here, where
which is awesome,
as he's been uncovering this mystery about the fact that maybe a lot of the people he's talking to are dead people who have been reanimated and painted, and he even sees like bits where like he grabs the film reel from a guy whose arm is like half falling off. There's another guy who's like one of the kids in the lab is like actually like painting himself, and he looks at like the makeup that the guy was using to paint his own arm to make him look like
those slow skin. Details are fantastic.
So the way that it builds these slow details into he has the film reel, he watches the film reel, and it's this really creepy found footage 8mm film that he plays and watches for himself. And it's this entire mob moving into this house where there's this couple having sex. And all of a sudden, the girl underneath whips out a knife and starts just stabbing the guy in the back while the entire mob is watching and like
very happy about it.
And then there's the guy's body moves slightly out of the way. And we get the reveal that it's his wife who was in the bed stabbing the shit out of the guy. And he's just like, holy fuck, flips out.
And then she comes into the lab, which is just like...
Yeah, when he goes to confront Jack Albertson as the mortician who has been doing all this. And they get that hint of detail that he was like fired from his previous position for like doing shit with bodies, like Reanimator style. That like mad scientist angle that it kind of takes in the last bit where he goes into his lab and they're showing the film on the screen and he's talking to him.
It's everywhere.
Even the stuff that he's saying to them I found really interesting, where he was like, they had to be disfigured because I had to make them look like they used to. And he says when people are sick or when people are dead, they don't get sick, they don't age, they are even more beautiful than when they are alive.
Right.
And then he believes in this so much that he even asks him to kill him, where he says, pull the trigger, help me become like one of my children, like this kind of thing. Like he's on like this full like power trip.
Doesn't he even say something similar to like, it's like you can kill me but you can't make me dead or something like that, which is just such a great line. Such a cool little
but then he introduces
sci-fi
the wife,
horror line.
And he was like, see, she only appears alive. And she's like, no, like she is alive. Like I live with her. I have a life with her. Like
and she just starts reciting these kind of like suburban wife things, and you're just
part of her face peels off.
And it's crazy too, because the first scene, a lot of these times they establish maybe like a friction in the marriage or something, but the first scene with them, it's just very wholesome. It's just, I love you, baby, I love you too. They hold each other, they kiss each other, it's nice. And then to have this scene to contrast that, where it's like all those just normal things that you're supposed to say or whatever is exactly what she's been doing. It's just, it's almost trained, you know. It's not real.
That's part of what it's getting at, is it couldn't have those imperfections, because the whole point is he's trying to create something picture perfect.
Right.
He's like, the only way to really achieve this picture perfect vision of small rural America that we have is by literally programming these corpses to do it and achieving it through violence and achieving it, and
and repetition. Just keep it going.
Well, and then it gets into the existentialism of, if you are dead and you are being programmed to just like, he realizes that he's being a small town sheriff. That's his gig.
Yeah.
And when the wife figures it out, is she says, Dan, I'm dead. Please bury me.
Yeah.
And that's one of the...
It's like she knows...
That's one of the darkest moments, is where she goes...
This is legitimately sad, this moment, for sure.
Oh, that whole scene is so tragic.
Yeah, like, I've never seen... Okay, like... She's buried herself except for her face.
Yeah.
And then she just like looks at him, says like I love you or whatever, and then buries her own face to put her back into the dead, the grave. And there's such a sadness, because then after that you get that initial sadness, and then you watch Dan, who's just crying hysterically, covering the grave with dirt before all of these zombies come up and start
offering condolences, because
their thoughts too. Like, it didn't seem like, it seemed like they were almost making this, I don't know, universal connection at this point or something like that.
And for me, they were programmed to do the small town thing, which is the small town neighborly thing, is to go and offer your condolences for the guy's loss. And he's like, you're all fucking dead. And then
in on this.
And then he's dead.
Yeah. That's the... Okay, this is at this point too, like where all these reveals were happening, I will say that I kind of saw him being dead. Like, it just had to come.
It's only natural.
But exactly.
They beat the Sixth Sense.
I literally said it. I was just like, he's dead. Come on, please make him dead. and then the last scene, baby, they give it to me, and it's I've never been more satisfied.
Oh yeah,
I swear to God.
watching him show the rest of the footage, because he's been so distracted that it's his wife in the bed in the footage that he doesn't continue to watch the film after that. And
the
leaves,
mortician comes back to life and plays the last little bit, I think, that he didn't show before.
Yes,
right.
And he shows him that he's the one who was stabbed by his wife in the bed. Yeah, he's actually dead.
And it's just, oh my God. And then he looks at his decaying fingers, and what Dobbs says, "Come here, boy. Let me fix those for you." Yeah. Credits. Oh, that is, oh my God. I got chills just thinking about it. I love it. I love this movie.
It again now. I love this movie so much.
Thank you so much for bringing this on.
Yeah, I rant about Dead and Buried to everyone who will listen. It's like, nobody talks about it, and everybody should. It's so good. It's so fun.
So good. I can't believe this isn't a bigger cult classic. It
should be. It really should be.
It really should be.
Yeah.
All listeners, go out and watch
Where's the Scream Factory release?
Yeah, for real.
Yeah, no, they're absolutely should be.
I love it.
Because even because I was a little concerned, like in the early goings, because I was kind of like I had just got like this weird feeling about it.
Yeah.
And then they actually do cohere it into something.
Yeah.
And in the plot. And then it wasn't until you get to that film photograph stuff near the end that it started to cohere into something even like more meaningful for me. And then by the time I was thinking about the film, I was like, that's just literally one of the most well-constructed horror films probably I've seen from the 80s.
Oh, yeah.
It's so good.
I mean, nowadays, it's really hard, in my opinion, to pull off a good twist, too. And there's, like, several in this that all threw me for a loop.
Well, see, and I was just concerned when I was thinking about it. I was like, is it more than the twist? Is there just, like, is this just...
for sure. I think
he was dead the whole time. Isn't it crazy? And I was thinking about it, and I was going...
That's, I think, why it works. Is because it's more than that, you know?
Well, because there is an existential quality to the way that you sort of watch people walk through just, like, this picture-perfect programming. You watch them be like, I'm the sheriff, I'm the sheriff's wife, I'm this guy in the town. And the way that we deal in stories with like archetypes and stuff like that, the way that you look at, and so when I was thinking about that, and then I was thinking that this whole time there's the creator who's been like making this, you get an idea about like performing through images like this rural town, but when really it's like this mutilated, reanimated husk that's been painted through literal pictures that we've watched the characters take throughout the whole thing. And then you get Gary Sherman's like picturesque kind of style that he's going for too, and like it really cohered into something like a lot more meaningful to me. And the fact that there ends up being sort of like power at play in it, and that Jack Albertson goes full mad scientist, like
it's great.
I mean, it cues us into what we're going to be talking about next week. It goes full mad scientist, like unhinged power mode. So I feel like that's why the twist ends up being kind of like in like a sociology kind of way, kind of like more fascinating than just, oh, the guy was dead.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like it was built for the twist. You know, it felt exactly. This whole time when these twists were being unveiled, it felt natural and necessary. Like I do hate when it's just like big veil, it was all a dream, or like that kind of shit. You know.
Yeah.
But you know, or he's dead the whole time. I mean, that's a trope at this point. But the way that they unveil it and the way that they present to you, I think it's because they almost like distract you with the initial town's killing that you just kind of forget about some of the deeper shit until it's right in your face. So it's a great.
It definitely, in my opinion, gets
really
us
well
something
crafted.
about this idea that like the very thing we're told is our life, is our surroundings, the things that we've built. Like, what if those things were already dead and we're just pretending that they're not? For me, that's why it made it a perfect double feature with The Fog, because it became an image of not just these characters, it became an image of an entire town. And this town was built from pictures by a fucking crazy zombie man.
Yep.
So then
it's two movies about two towns built on lies.
Yeah. So that's when I feel like when I go back and I rewatch this at some point, I'm going to be watching the whole movie looking for it. I kept thinking about that, the Potter's Bluff, A New Way of Life, and like the way that even the way that he gets into like these, you know, these old photograph styles of old towns. And it does make for an interesting allegory with The Fog as like a way of wrestling with like the origins of the things that we live in and being in a small town. And something was going on. People were scared about small town shit in the 80s.
For real. I kind of like that analogy too, where it shows that one, I think it's his assistant, and he's painting himself.
Yes.
And it kind of gives me that whole thing, like the analogy of like, in this kind of a fake society, you're really just playing a part, and it can take a toll on you. Mm-hmm. So him having to reapply his own makeup because it's just, I really like that symbolism there.
I really liked the idea of a doctor who yearns for death. That's just a clever irony that I
for sure
can get behind.
100%.
And he yearns for death because death can be more perfect than life. Right. He can
control it. He can sculpt it. It's perfection.
Yeah. So I find that stuff really good.
Yeah. Beautiful film.
But pivoting here to the reductive rating round, this one definitely gets the high 4 for me.
Yeah.
I am shocked that this isn't talked about more. I mean, I had a couple people recommend it to me, but not enough people recommend it to me.
Only like
I'm ashamed that not more people recommend
this
to me.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
So thanks to you, Trevor, for bringing this on. I mean, for all the reasons we've already said, I think that this is like a really intoxicating mix of like a little bit of Romero, a little bit of Fulci, a little bit of sort of like small town, picture perfect Americana, something like It's a Wonderful Life, and then
some Wicker Man folk horror,
exactly,
putting stuff in there.
Exactly, putting it into the Wicker Man folk horror and a little bit of like Invasion of the Body Snatchers, and also I realized watching this what it reminded me of thematically, what it was closest to that I've seen. It reminded me of Sam Fuller's The Naked Kiss.
Oh, okay.
Because that was also about the idea of investigating a picture-perfect ideal of a small town. And then the sickening underbelly underneath it that's kind of there that you can kind of feel, but you don't really...
It even has that scene at the very end where it's like the truth is revealed, but they're upset with her.
Yes,
because
for revealing...
she's the one that's revealed the horribleness that's in the town.
Yeah, that their town was literally funded and built by a pedophile.
Yeah, I like that. Well, not that. That bad timing. I do not like that.
But so to
good analogy though.
So to mix something like that and bring it into, honestly, I get a little bit of like a Lovecraft, little bit of a sort of like rural paranoia, and then and a sense of like history manifested into like tangible horror. So for me, you mix all of that, you take Gary Sherman, who again knows what he's doing with all these sort of like still compositions and deep focus compositions to match this idea of old photographs and the photographs that all the characters are taking, and then mixing that with like just this gut punch, like viciousness and nastiness to the actual violence itself, and kind of like a focus on what you can see versus like what you can feel. I gotta say, I had like a hell of an experience watching this for the first time, and I'm really excited to like get another round with it now that I kind of know the structure and the form a little bit better.
Yeah, 100%.
Definitely.
I'm gonna give it a high 4 as well. It was really close to the 5. It doesn't quite get there. Maybe on a few other watches, but it's very, very high up there. I love how he unveiled.
It is probably the best thing I've seen by Gary Sherman, though.
Oh, so. Yeah. I do think I like this more than Vice Squad, personally. But I just love this whole analogy of like the kind of fake suburban life or this fake town's life where everyone has a role, but the only reason that they can hold it together is based on this kind of this lie and this violence that drives them to be able to keep going. It's fantastic, and the slow reveal, like I think it's a great choice to make you have the perspective of Dan the whole time, so that you know the well, I guess you don't necessarily, like it's pretty much like the first 45 minutes you're with Dan, but you know a little bit more, and then it cuts to like when you're right there with him.
You're much more ahead of him, because we get the scene where he's rebuilding the body, and for me the reveal kicked in at the exact moment that he's talking to the dude whose face was just destroyed with acid like a scene ago.
Yeah.
Because as soon as that happened, I was like, holy shit, he just remade that guy.
Right.
and programmed him to have a conversation with Dan.
Yeah. And I love at that point.
And Dan's just having a conversation with a friend, and I'm sitting there going, dude, you're talking to a fucking dude whose face just melted. I don't think you understand the severity of what's going on here.
But I also do love, because at that point, Dan is starting to get into the whole, like, maybe voodoo is happening here. You know what I mean? So he's almost in this thing where he's leading towards the truth, but because of that, because the truth is so bizarre, he almost feels like he's going insane a little bit.
Well, you can't conceptualize it. Like,
right, and no one obviously in the town is going to, let up and let him know what's going on, because that's a whole part of their...
Even though they're basically just doing it in the open.
Yeah. They're not too subtle about it, for sure. But anyway, I love this movie. I highly suggest it. And I'm going to give it a high 4.
Sweet. For you, Trevor.
So I've loved this movie since I saw it when I think I was in grade 10 or 11, high school.
Wow.
So this is a 5 for me. It's like one of my all-time favorite movies.
Love it.
For all the reasons that both of you said, honestly. It just ticks so many boxes for me. I love small town horror. I love folk horror. I love how this borders over into almost like weird fiction, or like not quite cosmic horror, but like in the same realm, like you were saying, Lovecraftian.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's just a masterfully done film. Like, it's just everything works exactly right. It's even more impressive because it was originally pitched as a dark comedy, and then they basically, I think the investor pulled out or something, and the project wasn't going to happen, so they completely retooled it and made it more of a full-on horror film.
Interesting.
And
I could see it both ways, for sure.
Oh, for sure. The Mortician feels almost like a leftover, a little bit of that kind of dark comedy atmosphere.
For sure.
But just how masterful it is, I think everything works. It's just an engine flying on like all cylinders to do this really unique zombie invasion, the Body Snatcher style, folk horror cult thing.
Yeah. So a big fusion of things.
I honestly don't know another horror movie specifically like this at all. I can't think of anything quite like it. And I'm just, like you said, I'm boggled that it's not brought up in retrospectives and talked about online more.
Yeah,
it's
I'm
surprised
underrated.
Gary didn't do like more horror. The only other like big horror stuff I can see was Deathline, and
Deathline is really good, but it's not Dead and Buried good.
No,
but
it's
it is
definitely not quite
really
there.
good.
But he also, I guess, did Poltergeist 3, which I've never seen.
Oh, right. I've seen that, but it's been like a decade, so I'd have to rewatch it.
That movie is cool because of there's like a million really weird mirror gags in that movie. But that's like the main reason to watch it.
Yeah. The only thing I remember is the guy like grabbing his cheek and then ripping it open or something like that himself and revealing some type of creature or something. I don't remember too much, but...
Dope.
Nice. Well, he also did an action movie with Rutger Hauer called Wanted Dead or Alive. So,
well, we like Howard. Yeah, that'd be sweet.
Gonna check that out.
Is that the one called? The alternate title was Night of the Juggler.
Might have been.
Great name, Night of the Juggler.
It might be. I don't know.
Sweet.
That's killer.
All right. Yeah. Well, I think that will wrap it up for this week's episode. That was The Fog from 1980 and Dead and Buried from 1981. Thanks so much, Trevor, for coming on and bringing these films with you.
Thank you. This was so fun. This was great.
No problem at all. If you've got anything that you want to plug, now would be the time to do it.
Nothing really going on. I'm constantly doing commission work online. If you have any need of album art or a movie poster or book cover, anything like that,
a podcast logo.
Podcast logo, absolutely. I will do art for podcasts, whatever you want.
We can highly recommend it.
By
that's
experience, all. we had a great experience.
You can follow me on Twitter at Slimy Swamp Ghost, and I basically just vent about movies and draw ghosts, and that's it.
Nice.
Sweet.
Sounds awesome.
On your recommendation, both of us watched VFW recently, which we had a fun time.
Oh,
yeah, it was good.
That was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I watched that back to back with After Midnight. If you haven't seen that one yet, that one just knocked me on my ass. It's so good. It's so good. VFW is really fun as well, though.
I'll watch list that one too.
Gonna look it up. Yeah. I think we might end up doing VFW maybe on a bonus transmission when we get a time to do another. I'd love to talk about that.
Nice.
That'd be sweet.
We should talk about Bliss as well. Bliss is amazing.
Yeah, we
did briefly.
We brought it up on our
I
best
put it
of
on my
last year.
honorable mentions on our top 10 list.
Nice.
And but we didn't really get to like discuss it. So maybe we will. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that was
sure.
that was fun talking about sort of a bit of a
That was a cool one. I really liked
a bit of a
this.
Ferrera riff there, Driller Killer, the
Yeah.
addiction kind of thing going on.
Yeah.
Nice.
So that was fun. But for our listeners, we are going to be back in 1 week's time with a bonus episode for you guys on some mad scientists.
Yeah.
Because next week or the week after, I think, there is a remake of The Invisible Man coming out. By Lee Winnell of Saw and Upgrade fame. And it looks like a bit of a departure
Yeah,
from
it does, for sure.
other mad
Looks like they're dealing more with
films.
like domestic violence instead.
A little bit. So
Yeah.
I'll be curious to see how it goes because I typically like Winnell and I typically like Elizabeth Moss a lot too. So I'm curious
me
to check
too.
it out. But in honor of that, we are going to go back and we are going to do the original 1933 The Invisible Man.
Oh, it's so good.
It's
such a good movie.
so fun.
Very
Great
good.
adaptation of the H.G. Wells story.
Those effects are crazy too for the
yeah.
30s.
For 1930s, they're pretty insane. And we're going to be pairing it with a sort of later film that fits very well sort of thematically and I guess in terms of plot. We are going to be talking about Roger Corman's 1963 film X, The Man with the X-Ray Eyes.
Oh yeah.
That's an amazing double bill.
Yes.
Yeah.
So for anyone who wants to listen to that episode, that's patreon.com/Sleazoids podcast. That's going to be next week's episode. But in 2 weeks' time, we are going to be back with a special guest, returning guest Perry Rulland, who previously brought on Akira and Tetsuo 2 Body Hammer as his double feature. He recently just completed doing a short film and is working on a feature film, but he's going to take a break from doing that to bring on the 1930s classic that Jamie is super stoked about,
Oh
Freaks.
hell yeah. Hell yeah.
So we're going to be talking about Freaks, 2 30s movies in a row. We try a couple times a year to go back as far as we can go.
Yeah.
Because we kind of do, based on the name of this show, end up sticking closer to the 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
So we're going to go to the 30s 2 weeks in a row. We're going to do Invisible Man and Man with X-Ray Eyes, and then we're going to do Freaks. And
So excited.
Perry has paired Freaks with an anime called Midori.
Which we have heard is very out there.
Is very gross and very out there, and I'm not quite sure how it's supposed to pair with Freaks, but I guess we will find
But
out
I'm intrigued.
when I watch it because
They're both a circus setting.
Oh,
There we go.
well,
Yeah.
There we go. So Perry
Yeah.
does have something in mind.
God, if it's a circus setting in that one anime and it's like just supposed to be insane, I don't know. This is gonna be crazy.
Yeah. So
What
in
an
2
episode.
weeks' time, we're going to be talking about Freaks, and we're going to be talking about Midori. So get to watching those. We announced them in advance specifically so that you guys can
Yes.
you guys can keep on top of
Because
it.
we'll spoil everything.
Exactly. But anyway, yeah, that will wrap it up for this week's episode. Thanks so much for listening, and keep it sleazy.
Keep it sleazy, y'all.